I would like to call this regular meeting of the West Allis West Monkey Board of Education to order, please. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Ms. Emmons, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Suzette, would you please call the roll?
I will. Ms. Curran? Here. We have 3 board members excused, Mr. Ustruck, Mr. Bailey, and Mr. Keller. Mrs. Sujecki? Here. Mrs. Justum? Here. Ms. Emmons? Here. Mr. Lee?
Here.
President Sikich?
Present. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Board members and Dr. Lexman, any additions or modifications to tonight's agenda?
When we get to the consent agenda, I'd appreciate it if a board member would pull 9.2, the employment summary.
Okay.
There's some administrative appointments that I'd like to highlight a little bit.
Certainly, we can do that. One of us would be happy to do that. Board members, anything? Yep. Okay, we'll move on to public comments. Brian, as long as you're back there, none? The public has chosen not to speak, so we'll move on to superintendent's report.
Okay. So legislative update, it's really brief. I think the board's aware the state legislature is still working on finalizing the 2017 to 19 biennial budget. The major sticking point seems to be in transportation funding, but there are 2 different versions of the education budget now, one out of the Assembly, one out of the Senate. They have some similarities and some differences, so there's some details to hash out there. There does not seem to be on the horizon a resolution at this point, which gets to be a little concerning for school districts because we're getting closer into the next school year, and we're already into our fiscal year, and we don't really know finally what the budget is. One of the things we've done here is plan conservatively, so I think the board is aware, but for the public, even though there are consistent proposals to increase categorical aid, so there'll be some additional dollars coming into the school district from either proposal, the budget we planned assumed there would be none. And so we've taken a fairly conservative approach given our fiscal condition. I think that was probably wise for us. On the federal level, there's nothing new at this time. I think the federal government is trying to move forward with something on health care, and then they'll get to tax cuts and maybe eventually back to the federal budget. In terms of congratulatory resolutions, there's 2 this evening. Madison Gordon at Central High School. Madison was just profiled on Sunday night's Fox 6 Sports Blitz as this week's high school hotshot. Earlier this year, Madison committed to playing college volleyball at the University of Minnesota at Duluth, and she is also proud of her GPA of 4.3, which is impressive. And then Jason Mossbrook at Nathan Hale High School, and the board will recall this. Jason just returned from competing at the 2017 FCCLA National Leadership Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. Jacob competed in a category called Teach and Train, in which he had to display his knowledge of and his ability to develop and deliver lessons in family and consumer science. Jacob plans to pursue a teaching degree in family and consumer education, and Jacob received gold in this competition. So it was kind of one of those late field trips that the board approved, and Jacob represented us really well. So we thought we'd highlight that this evening.
Super.
In terms of 7.3, just a couple of really quick updates. There were no public comments on July 10th to respond to. One of the things I thought I'd share with the board is we've been, reviewing the strategic plan. We've set the goals for next year. They'll come back next month for the second reading. We had a conversation today, kind of a regular check-in with Melissa. It's a phone call, kind of coaching session with the leadership team, and we're working on a kind of a 2.0 version of how we do mid-year and end-of-year reporting to the board and the public. So again, trying to really evolve our set of practices, and we're adding now being able to kind of track data points over the 5 years of the plan, and try to capture in each school kind of a one-page snapshot on how they're doing during the course of the plan. So again, just with feedback from school leaders and working on the team, we think it'll help us really stay focused on the things that we're trying to monitor and improve. Again, the focus next year will continue to be in college and career readiness, so the percent of kids at that 61st percentile in math and reading. And then we're adding the focus around student and family well-being, and really with a focus on mental health, and that incorporates all the work we've been doing in social and emotional learning, mindfulness, restorative practices. That really is the expanded focus for next year, and so we're incorporating that into how we're starting to shape what we're going to be presenting to leaders and teachers when they come back. And then, speaking of that, Leadership Week, so we bring all of the administrators, deans, we're going to spend 2 days together, August 14th and 15th. We're going to begin on the 14th with a retreat with Youth Frontiers. So Youth Frontiers has worked with all schools this past year when we launched the school year. We've had a number of Youth Frontier retreats for students during the past year now. That's part of the work of really building positive cultures, and we've had our students in some of their leadership training, and they have even hosted a big multi-district training at Central this year for students. So we're bringing them back to launch the year with all of our leaders, and we're going to do the retreat called the Purpose Retreat. And it really is kind of calling leadership back to kind of what's our personal mission in this work, what drives us. It goes back to why, right? So the purpose of our work. And it's also the opportunity for us to bring and welcome new leaders kind of into the group through having that kind of engaging and a lot of fun that happens in those two. And so that'll be the opportunity for us to rejoin, revisit purpose, and then welcome the members that are new to the team that I'll introduce in just a few minutes.
Very good, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Lexman? Seeing none, we'll move on to Board President's report. The only thing I have to do is go over the calendar, which is not that crowded for this time of the year, which is okay. After tonight's regular Board of Education meeting, we do have a business services workshop dealing with employee health care and our health risk assessment. Monday, August 14th is a regular Board of Education meeting. Monday, August 21st, a board retreat with WASB, with Wisconsin Association School Board. And Monday, August 28th is our regular Board of Education meeting, followed by a workshop, human resources workshop on employee sick time. Just a reminder to people watching at home that our meetings start at 6 o'clock. They are televised, and if we break to go into a workshop after that, that is open to the public, but it is not televised. And all of the scheduled meetings that are on our off meeting nights are all open to the public. Anybody have any community news to share? Heather?
Well, tonight is National Night Out. I don't know if anybody got to go, but I went before the meeting, and there's time afterwards if we aren't running too late tonight, but there's lots of stuff there. And then also this weekend, the West House Players has their closing nights, the 28th and 29th at 7:30, and the 30th at 2 p.m. Jesus Christ Superstar.
Anyone else? No? I know you always look at me because I look at me, because normally you have something to share with us, because you're involved in so much stuff.
I know, and I have not been able to get to the CAD meetings. So it's a disappointment to me that I'm not doing that.
I do think there's one coming up August 11th. It's the McCarty Park event for families.
Oh.
But I think we'll have one meeting hopefully to bring that up.
You might not. No, our next one is the 14th.
It's the pool with barbecue.
Yes, yes. For all CAD members and their families.
But it's opposite an event that's across from our rec department. Our rec department is having an event the same evening.
Are they?
So
No, it might be two different audiences though, depending on how it's structured, so.
Well, people are going to have to check our website.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, we move on to the consent agenda. We have 9.1, the approval of the minutes, and 9.2, the employment summary and supplemental contracts, and 9.3, financial summary. Could we have a board member separate one out for Dr. Lexman? Stephanie?
Move to separate 9.2.
Thank you. We can do that. And you don't need to move it. All you have to do is ask. And we
I'd
do.
like to ask to move 9.2.
And we will say yes. Okay, so we'll take 9.1, the approval of the minutes from July 10th, and then the financial summary, 9.3, together. Any questions on those that have not been already previously answered? Entertain a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. No further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. Moving on 9.2, employment summary and supplemental contracts. Dr. Lexman.
So thank you for setting this aside. There are 4 individuals here that I'd like to highlight this evening. We're bringing a number of new teachers on, which is great, but we're also bringing some leadership changes. And so I'm going to start with Mike Weaver. So Mike is well-known. Everybody, each of you will have a little opportunity to take the podium and share a few words with the board. Mike has been the principal at Irving Elementary School, and we've added the position of Human Resources Manager, which, we took a risk in the budget cuts that we needed to make and lived without that expertise for a year. And so Mike was selected by the process. We had some really strong candidates, and we got to an end where we had 2 that the team felt were really equal, and the team felt strongly that given that circumstance, we should turn to the person that's an internal candidate and really grow our own. And we've been pretty successful with that.
Yep.
And so we're really, I'm personally really proud to have Mike join the team. He's going to bring a lot of energy. I think he's going to be a great fit for the team. But I'd like him to say a few words as he kind of transitions from principal to the district office.
All right. Well, first, thank you so much for coming tonight. I know it's a scheduled board meeting, but it's important that you guys are here, and I appreciate that. I do want to thank Marty and the directors for this opportunity. Irving has been a fantastic opportunity for myself personally, but also for the district. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really excited for what the future holds for not only Irving, as you'll find out tonight, but also for the district as I move forward into this position.
Excellent. Thank you. And
I just have one.
You go right
His
ahead.
expected start date is
But
already?
Last week, 27th, I believe.
yeah, officially the 27th.
I'm living in boxes currently, so
Right. Well, welcome, Mike.
Congratulations.
thank you.
Welcome to the team.
And so I'll stay with Irving right now, and then introduce Chris Gosch, also well known to the board. Chris is currently the academic dean at Irving, and given the timing of the opportunity for Mike to take on the role of HR manager, and rather than go out and post a position and do another search, which is 2 to 3 weeks, 3 weeks if we're really pretty efficient, then we have somebody in the middle of August. Our lessons from last year tells us here that that's probably not the best way to move into a new school year. And so when you have somebody as talented as Chris that knows the school community, is beloved by that school community, and knows the challenges, honestly, that Irving also has as a school, we felt really good about naming Chris as the interim principal. And the reason we're doing an interim appointment is because we also want to honor the process of engaging the larger school community in selecting the next permanent principal. And Chris will decide as she moves through the year whether or not that's really a great fit and she wants to enter into that process, but also that we honor the process of engaging parents and staff in the final selection. But I feel very comfortable turning Irving over to Chris at this time, and really look forward to a great year with you. So,
Thank you for your kind words, and I just also wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. I am absolutely thrilled. Can't wait to get started. I've already gotten started a little bit. And I'm, again, just grateful for the opportunity. I have actually been, I've served the West Allis West Milwaukee School District my entire career, which is something that I'm very proud to have been a part of. So I'm excited that I get an opportunity now to continue to serve the community in a different capacity. So I'm excited about this opportunity. So thank you very much.
okay.
Thank you.
Because Chris has been such a strong academic dean there, and it is a very specialized building. It isn't just our traditional elementary setting. Are we in motion with an academic dean to help support her, or what's happening there?
The short answer is yes. So we are in the process. We've been having some conversations with some current employees as well as Chris and Mike to get some feedback to try to figure out what the best way to support the building going forward is. So we're hoping to have an answer about that by early next week.
Oh, that's good. Glad to hear that. Hopefully be involved and get it done in a way that is suiting Chris well.
Yep.
Good.
Great. And so next I will turn to Michael Elliott. And so it's a mix of some internal moves, and then also I think it's also healthy to have and in new voices, new eyes come into organizations from time to time. And Mike applied for the opportunity at Hoover. We had over 40 applicants, and so parents on the panel felt really good about the fact that, even though there's been a lot of challenging news about our school district over the last couple of years, we're still, attracting really good people. What the panel really felt strongly about Mike is a real command of instructional leadership, really understands learning, having been a classroom teacher for more than 20 years. Has also been a lead teacher and teacher in charge, so has taken on that role at times when even administrators were out on leave. So understands the role. There'll be a learning curve when it's yours full-time, just like Chris will have. But also is really, Mike has a lot of passion around and is really working hard to understand the impact of trauma on kids. And has worked through, in his elementary school, a transition where the school had the districts redrawn in West Bend. So similar things that, we've experienced here, and schools that were combined, and the school that had a lower free reduced lunch rate went up dramatically. So essentially became a very different kind of school. And when I spoke with Mike's references, all of them spoke to the fact of his commitment to social justice, his commitment to equity, and his ability to help other teachers navigate that kind of change. So I think in Mike we have a powerful new principal that I'm really happy to bring in. Mike's children went to Hoover. He lives in the neighborhood. I'm a little jealous because if he chooses, he could walk to school. So welcome. Have a few words with the board.
Well, first of all, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I mean, to be chosen by West Dallas is really a privilege for myself. I've been in education for 25 years. As Dr. Lexman said, my family has gone through the West Dallas School District. My wife and I have lived here for 25 years as well. And what you spoke of earlier about what we're going to do as administrators coming up really is my passion, working with people. I want all families to feel welcomed at Hoover and all children to feel welcomed at Hoover, as well as the staff members. So I will you have my promise, I will dedicate myself to making every day great for anybody that comes in contact with Hoover. So I cannot thank you enough. This is really an honor for me. I really appreciate it.
Right.
Welcome aboard.
Congratulations.
And last but certainly not least, Brianne. Just checking to make sure it's you. So again, Brianne doesn't really need an introduction to the board, but Brianne is going to be, we're recommending Brianne for the next principal at Madison Elementary School. And in the process with that search, it was really clear that parents and staff were looking for somebody that is going to really connect well with kids, being such a small community. Somebody that's an all-in kind of principal, because there are days in a small school where the principal has to grab a mop or has to sub a class, or the list can just go on, because you don't have lots of people to turn to help if there's a gap. And Brianne's energy really matched that kind of dynamic in a small elementary school. And her background in special education, I think, as a special ed dean, will serve Madison well as well. So I'm really proud to have Brianne join the group of principals. I think your own kind of personal energy, humor, wit is going to be inspirational for all of us. So I'm really looking forward to that. So you don't need to introduce yourself, but talk a little bit to the board about what you're hoping for Madison.
Well, thank you, Marty. First, thank you for allowing me to serve the student, staff, parents, and community of Madison. It is my honor because it's the building that helped grow me as a learner. So I'm very excited to be there and to work with you, because I truly think moving forward we want every student at Madison to be college and career ready. So that's what we'll do. So go Mustangs.
Wait.
Yes.
What I didn't know is that, I did know that you attended Madison to the interview, but I didn't know that you had gone through school and that you had gone through with our sons, Pat Mine. So that, and she worked in the rec department with Andy over at Hale.
Did Madison, Franklin, Wright, and then Hale.
So, you've gone through all of the district, and you're still here. It's wonderful.
And I'll stay if you'll let me. So
I think we're thinking of that.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So with the if the board approves all of those recommendations, what it also allows us as a leadership team to accomplish is that we've got all the leadership positions in schools and at the district filled in July. And that was a goal that we set for ourselves, and we think that's really important to keep the organization moving and the planning that needs to get done now before, the little ones come back and the big ones come back on September 1st.
Super. Any questions on, Noah?
Other than the recently vacated academic dean position at Irving, is there any other dean positions that we're still waiting to fill?
That's a Deidre.
Nope. So,
Okay, thanks.
simple answer. There's 2 other positions that are in the employment summary tonight. Melvin Johnson, AP at Central. He couldn't be with us tonight. His wife's having some surgery, so he's with that. And then the Shondell Hernandez has been in the employment summary as the Dean of Students at Central. So,
Just give us a little update on Melvin Johnson.
sure. Do you want to talk about, Marty used to work with him years ago.
So I worked with Melvin when he was a teacher for a number of years in Milwaukee. So he comes out of Milwaukee Public Schools and then worked for a couple charter schools. He worked for Universal Schools most recently as an administrator. So he's grown pretty quickly through the ranks. When I first met Melvin, he was working at Transition High School, which is a school for students that were coming back to high school after a period of incarceration or expulsion. So these were kids that were really trying hard to get back on track, but also had the kind of background that would present challenges at times. And Melvin was particularly good at engaging with young people when they were wound up. So I think he's going to be a real asset at Central, but also has just really good relational skills with teenagers. So I think that part of it is why I think they were really, the team there felt really strongly about offering the opportunity to Melvin. So I look forward to working with him. I'm really proud that he's joining our team, and I think it'll be fun for me to have him as part of the district, work with him once again.
And I was able to sit those interviews, and so in the interviews, some of his academic skills that he's developed during his time as a principal in MPS and doing some leadership in MPS also came through loud and clear. He has a very calm, like just a gentle nature about him, which was something that appealed to the team that was interviewing that day quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, questions, comments? Seeing none, motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any last minute discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Congratulations.
Welcome aboard.
We're moving to action items. We have 6 of them. First one is 10.1, Board Policy Number 342.5, Programs for Disadvantaged Students. It's a first reading, and we'll call Deidre.
So this one is quite a bit different. Instead of just a change of policy where we strike through some of the old language and make new language, our policy around Title I hadn't been updated in so long that really it was important to just kind of start from scratch and update the policy going all the way through. So the big difference is that we wanted to make sure that we were addressing and that are required under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act are the elements around assessment. And then because we are now district-wide title, so we were school-by-school title when the old policy was written, and now that we're district-wide title, having the number 3 around comparability services, which is how we then determine how we're going to use the funding within the district, is an important thing to have in our policy, as it's different than when we were school-by-school. Any questions?
Okay, we would need a motion to approve.
Move to
Just a
approve.
reminder, it is a first reading.
Right.
Second.
Thank you.
I didn't think we were approving anything. This is
You're approving the
reading.
first
We're approving the first reading.
Okay.
Was that the hand up for a question? Oh,
Nope, he said second.
okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? That passes. 10.2, Board Policy 345.6, Graduation Requirements. And this is a first reading.
So the reason that we were looking for an update around this one is this one's going to come back at least one other time this year as well. So we have some work to do around credit recovery and defining what we're doing for credit recovery. But we also don't have a defined accountability measure around early graduation. So right now, in some districts it's in their policy, in some districts it's in the course catalog. And for us, there wasn't clearly articulated in either one of those places. So being new this year, we fell back on the board policy we had, which basically was that as long as the student had the requirements for graduation, then we were granting early graduation. And so as Adam and I went through a year of doing those, we really felt it was important to put some parameters around what does it actually mean to graduate early and what was it intended for, and then what would we be looking for if we thought, we've set out this strategic plan where we said we want all of our students to be ready. Well, the ready for them could mean a lot of different things, but without any definition around what that meant as a graduate of our school district, we felt it was important to put some parameters in around that. So there's two formats to this one. Sorry, I should explain that as well. As Suzette and I were doing them, we had talked at board committee about it being a rule within the policy, so that the policy would be about what the requirements are for graduation, and then we would move early graduation to a rule. Well, when Suzette and I looked at it, then it really should be the graduation responsibilities and credit recovery should also fall in the rule, because those are all subsets. Or our other option, which is why you have two versions of it, would simply be to embed the early graduation requirements into the policy. And so that's why you have two versions of it.
Well, that was question number one.
Okay.
Question number two, it says students may participate in May graduation ceremonies, but our kids don't graduate until June. It says May.
Oh, it says May? Okay, sorry, it should say June. I
Okay.
apologize about that.
I was like, wait. Are we doing
Good
something
question.
different this
No,
year?
no, we're not graduation in May. I'll update that.
So do we need feedback on which direction we want to go, whether it's the full
Yeah,
policy?
whether
versus
you
the
want it
rule?
embedded in the policy, or if you're comfortable with the elements that kind of define our graduation as all being part of a rule.
What would be the recommendation of your team?
We had recommended the early graduation requirements being part of the rule, so it would seem to make sense that they're a rule. Your policy really is around your graduation, and then other things would fall under the rule that supports that policy, is how we had talked about it at committee. It just then, as we were really looking at it, Suzette and I, we thought, well, then there's other things in it that really do belong in the rule. So that was how we discussed it at committee, but frankly, I'm open to which either way you feel more comfortable. Do you have a preference, Marty?
Oh, I think that level of detail is better placed inside of a rule, and it gives us a little bit of flexibility if we need to adjust things rather than to come back and change policy again.
So if we take action on this, we are taking action on it as a policy and a rule? Because there's two versions here, so we have to designate which one we're
Correct.
taking action on, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So board members, when you...
Both, correct?
It would be both. So the new policy, and I don't know if that's how we lined it up, maybe I should have explained that. The new policy would be just the second version, which is this then becomes, sorry,
345.6 and
And-
345.6 rule.
rule, correct.
So those would be the numbers that have to be in the motion to approve it.
This is first reading, right? Let's come back.
Right.
But
Comes
between
back.
now and then, maybe we'll have it as a rule or a policy.
Correct. Yep, so that's first thing, we just need to get some direction on which way that we think that we're more comfortable with it. Our sentiment at committee was, again, the same thing, that in a rule, you have some flexibility to change a few of those requirements. This would be the first year that we're trying out some of these as the elements required for early graduation. They're more consistent with what all of the districts in our area are doing than what we've maybe historically done. And whether we did it differently at one point or not, we didn't have the documentation around the requirement. So it was important to get that documentation down. But the rule allows us some flexibility should we decide, oop, nope, WIA changed their rules on grade point average. So then we might want to change ours. It does give us the flexibility to go in and make some of those changes without coming back and amending the policy.
So that isn't specifically in the agenda, so how do you want us to go about? Do you want us to just do what we think, or?
No, I think it's really just, at this point, approving the first reading of the policy and the rule, and the feedback then just gives us
You know where to
the
go from
direction that we
Okay.
need to come back the second time with it cleaned up.
Okay.
Yep.
Would this be in effect for the class of 2018 then? So anybody looking to do early graduation this year, they would have already had to adhere to this prior to this year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And that's why it's coming to you now, even though it would make some more sense to bring this and credit recovery together later in the year, but that deadline is the fall. So we want to make sure that that's out there before we get, we had a high number of applicants for early graduation last year.
I think we will again this year too.
Prompted this conversation.
Well, we do understand that students have different needs for why they need to graduate early, but it's also important to know what our expectations are for graduation. And it shouldn't necessarily come easy. It needs, there's a set of requirements that really prepare you as a student to enter post-secondary education or whatever else you're choosing to do, and to some degree this has been lax. And so it's important to tighten it up and make sure that the students understand what the expectations of the district are. So I move to approve, as has been recommended, that this is a policy with the rule to be attached for specifics.
Second.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That one passes the first reading. Code of Conduct, 10.3.
So this is the code of conduct that we had the workshop on. We took some of the feedback from the workshop that evening and went back to the whole committee. So as you guys know, many of you know, I think, it went through a committee. It started at about 20 people and kind of dwindled down to a core team of about 7 in the end, who were the ones who finally put together the document. But we went back and took some of the feedback from the board on whether or not some of the consequences in the chart were as stringent as we thought they should be, as well as went back through anything for which students had been expelled within the last several years or expelled in our area, and looked at some of the legal guidance. And so we made some changes to those in red in the code of conduct. The other things that got added to it was the language around pre-expulsions. And so that's where, Sue, you had some questions when we had workshop around what happens when it's really repeated refusal, where it's, going back at the same thing multiple times. Yeah. And that's where that would come into play. So there's some language articulated in there around pre-expulsions, and then with the consequences or with the leveled system, at step 3, there's consideration for a pre-expulsion. At step 4, it's a requirement for a pre-expulsion, and then you follow the proceedings. The nature and intent of what the committee wanted with this document is still the same, and that's where there was maybe less things marked in the 5 column than as we looked at it, is our goal is to keep students in the classroom and change that behavior. So on our end, a training piece is to make sure that we're reading the document from 1 up to 5 and making sure that we're using the most appropriate level of consequence for a student that will hopefully correct that behavior so that we don't see a repeat of the same behavior, at the same time that we're keeping everyone in a building safe, staff, students, visitors, whoever that may be. Noah did have one question that he sent to me in an email that I thought was a more appropriate question for a discussion by the group, so I asked him to hold that one and bring it up to the group this evening.
Right now?
Yes.
Sure. Oh.
Now's your time, Noah.
On the spot.
I'm trying to find the, so it was regarding a very serious matter, so I shouldn't be joking about it, but bringing what would be considered a bomb or explosive device to school. So in the current iteration of the Code of Conduct policy, the only option is a 5. That's your only option. And my concern was there could be instances, especially at the elementary level, but maybe even at the intermediate and high school level, where someone doesn't knowingly do that. And the example I thought of was a grenade. So a grenade would be considered an explosive device or a bomb. If you have a live grenade in school, the only option you would have would be that you would be a level 5. And I would like to see, my intent was to look at the intent of it. Was someone bringing it to school because they were knowingly bringing it to school, or were they bringing it to school because they thought it was something neat they wanted to show their friends, not realizing, because there are, for those you don't know, very realistic looking fake grenades. And without really having a good knowledge about it, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. And so someone might be bringing some to school as a show and tell piece almost, and would in fact be bringing a live explosive device to school, and underneath the policy, they would only be considered a level 5. So I was advocating for a level 4 or level 5, and then allowing that intent to be determined by those people who are, analyzing the situation. With the understanding that level 4 is still a very serious thing, it has to be taken seriously, and I think it definitely should be. But if someone is really lacking the knowledge in that and is trying to do something, almost educational, if you're like, I want to bring something that was in World War II or something like that to show people about it, even though it was, a replica, I thought, but it was Grandpa's, and he didn't tell me it wasn't a replica, and so now we're in this situation.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think we can support that, and it doesn't preclude us from going to level 5, given if there are circumstances where this was intentional, there was a plan to do harm. So I think that seems like a reasonable adjustment, yep.
Sue?
Taking a look at page 14, where you have, and the same problem that I had before, behavior that disrupts instruction and learning of other students in classroom. And you have level 1, 2, and 3. But and I think that you addressed it earlier in the PBIS, where it talks about if it's repetitive, that reflects a different a tier and a different what have you. But it's still, if it's going to be repetitive, and in here somewhere it talks about cursing and bad language, and that doesn't seem to move to a level 4. And I'm curious that if it's preventing other students from learning, and then I think that we need to have some kind of an attention drawn to it besides, it's lesson response 3 is 0 to 3 days of out-of-school suspension, and then that's what tops it off. And
that would also be, sorry, Sue.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that would also be consideration for a pre-expulsion contract. So I think your concerns on that one come in, where that is a behavior that's going on Tuesday, and then if the student is excluded from school and they have a restorative conference and they're coming back into school and they've repaired the situation in the classroom, that then you still see that same behavior going over and over and over again. So at that point, you're really talking about a repeat of that same behavior, which then at that point you might be considering a pre-expulsion contract, for which breaking that by continuing to repeat the behavior, considering the fact that we've done intervention to help you stop or investigated other ways to help you stop that behavior, is where that one would sit. This is intended to be outside of pre-expulsion contracts, kind of first offenses. That's really how you're reading that. And so a child disrupting a class, even if it was repeatedly, during a class period or in the same day, we just wouldn't have a situation where on that first offense that would go any further than that.
And I understand that. I'm just hoping that a first-year teacher or whatever teachers understand that when they're looking at this, they're saying, this is what the matrix says, and so I can't go any further, versus the fact that if it's repeated, that I can go to a level 4.
And a teacher wouldn't be doing those things, so that this would be implemented by the administrator in the building. Because anytime you would be considering, and especially exclusionary discipline, that's not done by the teachers, that's done by the administrator in the building.
Thank you.
So the teacher at that point would have had quite a bit of support from the office, and again, in an effort to stop and help teach that child differently, get a reteaching opportunity so that the teacher could continue to teach the class.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, on elementary, Noah brings up a good point about what there is there. But in the past, I have seemed to remember that there's a lot of principal discretion because the children are so young, and there's such a difference between kindergarten and 5th grade and the different incidents. So does that still kind of apply yet, that there's a way it's weighed before it gets to this chart? What kind of process are you asking your principals to go through?
Okay. Yeah.
So, yes, there's still discretion. Anytime you're working with young people any of you on the board that have had more than one child that you've raised or helped somebody else raise knows that every child's a little bit different, and some kids respond to some kind of consequence that others don't, and some respond to rewards that others don't. So that's always got to be consideration. What we're trying to accomplish here, though, is to communicate to students, older students, through this, and through parents, for all students, clarity around our expectations, right? So what's appropriate in school. So that's one of the big kind of messages we're trying to deliver here. And then to provide a little more consistency across schools, right? So it doesn't take away some of that discretion, but that generally principals should be starting in about the same place when they see the same offense. And then from there, you've got to take into individual considerations of the student, the family, kind of the background that you know, and you know what works with that young person.
And Pat, also, there are a couple topics in here, which you probably saw, which in elementary does split between K-4 and 3rd grade, and then 4th and 5th grade have different kind of levels. So I think,
And that's a good idea.
Right.
I agree. I think that helps to clarify.
Yep.
The issues, the consequences, it's a good thing, for breaking the levels.
Yeah, and I think the general message in the whole document is that we take behavior very seriously and we take safety very seriously, but at the same time, our lens is to keep kids as much as we humanly can in classrooms and connected to the learning. And sometimes that learning is around learning different behaviors so that we're not pulling out this chart to make any determinations on that student again, and sometimes that's the academic learning that goes on in classrooms. But at the same time, yes, we have an obligation to keep staff and students and visitors safe, and so therefore, sometimes that is what we're going to have to do, is utilize exclusionary discipline to do that.
Heather?
I will just say that when we reviewed this in committee, this is going to be so much nicer for our families, because you've seen the same thing for so many years. And it's laid out simply and quite, this is what our expectation is. I think this is going to be fantastic for our families too. So they can say, well, it says here, so that when what do I expect if my child does X, Y, or Z? Well, it's right there. It will either be level 2 or level 3 or level 1 or level 2. So it's,
Yeah. And that those expectations are somewhat consistent, but yet adjust to the development of the child as they go through school. So the other thing about the code of conduct is this would be, so we're reading it tonight as an approval, but then it would be embedded into the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook. So at committee, Student Services Committee, we reviewed kind of a very rough draft of the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook. We are borrowing from some neighbors to piece together one that we think is comprehensive and yet is a little bit easier to read and follow than we felt like our previous one was. We felt like it was a little piecemeal. There were some things in it that Heather had noticed that were really outdated. So this would then get embedded right in there as you talk about, what students can and should do at school, what parents can and should do at school, what staff should be expected to do at school, our policies on truancy and attendance, some of the annual notifications that we're required to do, and then this would be embedded right in there in hopefully as clean and easy to read of a document, start to finish, as possible.
Sue?
How do families find out about this? Are we going to be printing code of conducts, or is it going to go on the website, or?
It goes on the website, and then as part of the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, schools review it at the school level, and then families sign off saying that they had received an electronic copy of it and that they agreed to it. If a family wanted it printed off for some reason, I think they do that at the school level. We used to print them all off, and then there was a page you tore out at the back, and the family signed it, and then we had a secretary hand count all of the, right? So now we just have an electronic way to do that allows us to manage it a little bit easier, and then the family has access to that electronic copy at any point that they need it.
So, I'm not quite understanding. So, you're going to inform the families that this is on their school website?
Correct.
And that they must read it?
Yep, and then there's an electronic signature that you can do on there. At some point, Skyward would have the capability to have parents check off that they've updated their information and that they've read the student. That's how my children have Skyward. And so at this time of year, I'm going to get an email pretty soon that tells me that I have to go in and note that I've read the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook and do an electronic signature, and then that's all tracked in Skyward. As we're in the middle of the conversion, we're certainly not adding anything, you know, the team's doing a great job at taking the Skyward conversion at a nice manageable pace and step by step. So we're not quite ready for that this year. So this year we'll do exactly what we did last year, which is they get the link and they get the information and they get the electronic signature saying, yes, I've received this, yes, I've read this. They sign off electronically, and then that's what we do.
Okay. You might, just for the fun of it, add this to the PTA council. And, you know, that would be a good way to inform people, you know, that it might be a nice, you know, a topic for the council.
Sure, it's a good idea.
Any other questions or comments?
You need a motion?
Yep.
Move to approve?
Second.
Last minute discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. Move on to 10.4, Rec 217, 218, 220 agreement. Thank you, Deidre.
Yep, so Andy's coming over. This is an annual item that comes before the board once a year. We still have students that are working their way through Chapter 220. We don't take any new students because we've reached the diversity threshold that doesn't allow us to enroll students through, new students through Chapter 220, but we do have students with us.
Yep, we will have 9 students, I think, all in high school at this point. And we're just continuing so the Chapter 220 program ended new students about 4 years ago, but students that were currently in your school district are allowed to continue until they graduate. So this is really just a continuation for those 9 individuals that are already in our seats, so that they can continue through our school district and graduate as seniors.
Questions for Andy?
Yes.
Stephanie?
So last year we approved 14, and this year there's 9, so it's 5 people graduating?
Yep, 5 are seniors. Yep.
Does that seem to be the progression? I mean, as we go down, that they're
No,
graduating
they're
and not
typically
leaving?
2 or 3 a class.
Okay.
That 5 was kind of a blip, even if you look back at 3 or 4 years prior to this, 5 was kind of high.
But that's where the drop-off is coming from every year?
Yeah.
Is through graduation, not through leaving to go, you know, in 10th grade, now they're going to a different school?
Well,
district for
when
the
school
most part?
starts in the fall, there's a potential that 1 or 2 of those 9 could be gone.
Sure.
But we haven't seen our Chapter 220 students leave to go to another district. It's typically as seniors are graduating.
Okay.
And on the flip side, can any 220 students from other districts come in here if they move? Or I think we're at the tail end of our cycle. I don't think we qualify anymore. We're just exiting out those students that
Right, we
graduate,
have,
is that
last year
correct?
we had 25 students in MPS through the Chapter 220 program. Again, they cannot accept any more through the program from our district. So again, we're just cycling those 25 residents out through MPS. They're cycling their 9 residents out through us. And then that program ends.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Last minute discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. We'll move on to 10.5, the resolution authorizing a loan in the amount of $3 million for the purpose of financing annual capital improvement projects. Mr. Crowley.
So as you know, we brought the capital improvement plan on May 8th at a target of $3 million. We approved the capital improvement plan on May 22nd for that loan amount of $3 million. This is now going forward with the borrowing. We're pursuing a state trust fund loan. It'd be 3.5% for 10 years, so that's roughly about $350,000 a year. It is part of our operating budget, so it's really part of Fund 10. Even though it's debt, we actually see it as reduced revenue into Fund 10, increased revenue into Fund 38, but those two are all under the same umbrella. So this doesn't affect the taxpayers as a new loan increase. It falls under us budgeting to buy a car if we were a homeowner or paying a mortgage. It's a loan that we're borrowing so we can do capital improvements now, but pay off over the course of the next 10 years. And again, reverts to the 2017-18 5-year capital improvement plan.
2 questions. First, would there be any benefit, and it goes for both the items, this one and the next one, if we wait until we get rebonded after our audit is done to see if we'd be able to get a better interest rate than 3.5%?
So certainly that could, but we will not be getting that until next spring, probably late April at the very earliest.
I see.
So we're looking to get projects done now so that they're done prior to school start, and then,
I didn't realize there was such a lag. I thought it was like,
right, yep. They're going to wait for our official audit to come in, and then to see how we're progressing through 17, 18 before they're willing to do that.
okay. The other question I had was regarding the amount of money that was estimated, 29.3 million for of CIP projects we had sitting out there right now. With the energy efficiency projects, which I know not all of them were originally included in the CIP, but would that then reduce that dollar amount of projects that would have to be done with the projects we were
Yeah,
including?
the total amount, whatever that is, $29 million and
Yeah.
some change, yes, certainly some of the boilers that are within the first 5 years, and the first 2 to 3 years of roofing, depending on how much we can fit inside of that, will be eliminated. But then we're trying to set up that $500,000 a year roofing cycle so that it's pretty steady at $500,000 and get more of a routine on our boilers, but it'll knock out some of that cost through the energy efficiency project.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
I just have one more addition. Next fall, probably about this time, maybe a little, well, I guess this is summer to fall, we'll be looking to refinance a good portion of our state trust fund loans, depending on how well our rating comes out. So while I guess we could wait to pursue it now, it doesn't help us get the projects done, but certainly the intention is to see where we fall next year with our Moody's rating, and then look to kind of bundle it in a package and refinance it.
Okay. Good.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Last
We
minute
need a
discussion?
roll call on that.
We need a roll call?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a roll call, meaning yes or no.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey's excused. Ms. Emmons?
Yes.
Ms. Curran?
Yes.
Mrs. Justum?
Yes.
Mr. Keller's excused. Mr. Eustruck is excused. Mrs. Sujecki?
Yes.
President Sikich?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That passes. We'll move on to 10.6, the resolution authorizing a loan in the amount of $12.8 million for the purpose of financing Act 32 energy efficiency projects.
This is just back on the docket because, again, we're pursuing a state trust fund loan, and based on their need to have it board approved with their specific language, we're just bringing it back in front of the board. Nothing has changed from the prior $12.8 million. It's just a requirement from the state trust fund loan program. I know a question has come up, are we going to be pursuing these projects over the course of the 10-year borrowing? Just a reminder that, again, we're trying to get the projects done as fast as we can, but just paying it over the course of 10 years. So I know our target date was October of 2018, so a little over a year. We're still on target for that, but depending on how things go. But the idea is we're as fast as we can possibly get them done and get on schedule to get those things in the books.
Any other questions or comments?
Move to approve?
Second?
Second.
Okay, we need a roll call on this one, too. Roll call.
Mrs. Sujecki?
Yes.
Ms. Curran?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey's excused. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Eustruck is excused. Mrs. Justum?
Yes.
Ms. Emmons?
Yes.
Mr. Keller's excused. President Sikich?
Yes. Okay, that concludes our action items. We're at number 11, the board member suggestions for future agenda and/or workshop items. Sue?
I would like to have an update on the sale of the buildings, and specifically what we're going to be doing with this building. Are we renting? Are we? What is the? What do you perceive is the moving date for the offices and departments? That which would include the rec department.
Okay. Write that all down so I don't forget. Anybody else? Seeing none, that concludes our televised portion of this evening's meeting. We'll take a 5-minute break while Brian takes down the cameras, and then we will move into our discussion and workshop. We are at recess.